I was house-sitting for my cousin while she was out of town for a wedding. She had a dog, an old golden retriever named Max, who was easy to take care of. He mostly just laid around and watched the rain through the window. It had been raining non-stop since I arrived, and the storm was only supposed to get worse. Her house was in a quiet, wooded neighborhood, not too far from town, but secluded enough that you could go all day without seeing a single person. That night, after making myself some tea, I curled up on the couch with Max beside me. The storm outside had picked up, heavy raindrops smacking against the windows, the wind howling through the trees. As I scrolled through my phone, I noticed the landline ringing. I didn't even realize my cousin still had one. The caller ID just said private number. I hesitated but let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, it rang again. Private number. I wasn't going to answer, but when the answering machine clicked on, a voice whispered through the speaker. It was quiet, almost drowned out by the storm, but I could still hear it. It said my cousin's name. Then silence. I felt uneasy but tried to brush it off. Maybe it was a wrong number or some spam call. Still, something about the way they said her name made my skin crawl. Max sat up, staring at the front door, his ears perked, body stiff. I looked over, confused. "What is it, boy?" He didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared. I walked over, flipping on the porch light. Through the peephole, all I could see was the rain pouring down, the wind pushing leaves across the wooden deck. No one was there. But then I saw it, the shape of wet footprints leading up to the door. My stomach dropped. My first thought was maybe it was a delivery driver, but they wouldn't walk right up in this weather without leaving a package. I waited a few minutes, listening, but heard nothing else. Eventually, Max laid back down, though he kept his eyes fixed on the door. I tried to go back to my tea, my phone, my book, anything to distract myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. At around midnight, I decided to go to bed. My cousin's guest room was small but cozy, with a window that overlooked the backyard. I made sure the doors were locked before heading upstairs. Max followed me, curling up at the foot of the bed. As I started dozing off, a noise outside made my eyes snap open. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't the wind. It was a creaking sound, slow and deliberate, like weight shifting on the wooden steps of the porch. Then a knock. Not a normal knock. It was light, almost hesitant. 3 soft taps. I held my breath. Maybe I imagined it. Then it came again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Max lifted his head, his body tense. I slid out of bed as quietly as possible, creeping toward the window. I pulled the curtain back just enough to peek outside. The porch light cast a dim glow over the wet wood, but I didn't see anyone. But then I noticed something just beyond the light. A figure stood near the tree line, barely visible in the darkness. They weren't moving, just standing there in the rain, watching the house. My heart pounded. I wanted to believe it was a trick of the light, but I knew better. Someone was out there. Someone had knocked on the door and was now just standing there. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. The operator answered, and I tried to explain the situation as calmly as I could. They said an officer would be on the way. I stayed at the window, watching the figure. Then, without warning, they moved. Not toward the house, but around it. I lost sight of them as they disappeared beyond the backyard fence. I ran out of the bedroom, making sure the back door was locked. My cousin had security cameras, so I pulled up the app on my phone, checking the live feed. There, on the side of the house near the kitchen window, a man. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, his face obscured by the hood of a rain-soaked jacket. He stood completely still, facing the window, watching. I backed away, trying to stay out of sight. Max let out a low growl. I didn't dare move closer to the window, afraid he'd see me. Then he did something that made my stomach twist into knots. He reached up and pressed a hand against the glass. He stayed like that for what felt like an eternity before slowly dragging his fingers down, leaving streaks of water behind. I could barely breathe. Then, as suddenly as he appeared, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They searched the property, but he was gone. The only evidence he had been there were the wet footprints leading around the house and the streaks on the window. I never got a call back from the private number. The security footage caught a glimpse of his face, but it was too blurry to make out any details. The police took the footage and filed a report, but nothing ever came of it. My cousin changed her locks and added more cameras, but she never got another visit from the man in the rain. At least, not that she knows of. I had been looking for a new job for weeks with no luck. Every application I sent seemed to disappear into the void. Then, one afternoon, I got an email from a company I didn't remember applying to. The message was short and to the point. A marketing firm looking for a new analyst. The pay was good, the position sounded promising, and they wanted to set up an interview as soon as possible. The manager, someone named Derek, asked if I could come in that evening. It felt odd to schedule an interview so late, but I wasn't in a position to be picky. I agreed, and he sent me an address that wasn't too far from my apartment. It was in a business park on the outskirts of town, a place I wasn't familiar with. As I pulled into the parking lot, I immediately felt uneasy. The building was small, almost nondescript, with no signs or logos. The windows were dark, the lot completely empty except for my car. I checked the address again. It matched what Derek had sent me. I called the number from his email, but no one picked up. I was about to leave when my phone buzzed with a new email from Derek. Running late, inside, door unlocked. Something about it didn't sit right with me. My instincts screamed at me to get back in my car and drive away, but I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. I pushed the door open and sure enough, it wasn't locked. The interior was dimly lit, a few flickering fluorescent lights humming overhead. The office was eerily quiet. No reception desk, no sound of typing or movement, just a row of empty cubicles and a hallway leading to what looked like conference rooms. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing down the hall. No response. I took a cautious step forward, my shoes barely making a sound against the worn carpet. I kept expecting someone to appear, but no one did. As I moved further inside, my unease grew stronger. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A door slightly ajar at the end of the hall, a faint glow seeping through the crack. I walked up to it slowly, my hand hovering near the doorknob. Pushing it open revealed a single chair in the center of the room, facing an old, flickering computer monitor. The screen was blue, with a single line of text. "Sit down." I backed away immediately, the air in the room suddenly feeling suffocating. I turned on my heel and walked quickly back down the hall toward the exit. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, not mine, behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. The hallway was just as empty as before, but I knew what I heard. My heart was pounding as I picked up my pace, practically sprinting for the door. The moment my hand touched the handle, I felt something, just the faintest brush of fingers against my back. I yanked the door open and bolted to my car, slamming the door shut and locking it in one fluid motion. I sat there, breathless, staring at the entrance of the building. It was still completely dark, no sign of anyone inside, but I knew I wasn't alone in there. Something had been behind me, watching me. I sped home, not stopping for anything. The entire drive, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see something lurking in the back seat. When I finally got home, I locked every door and window, double-checking them all twice. I told myself I would forget about it, that it was just some sick prank. But later that night, as I sat on my couch trying to unwind, my phone vibrated. Another email from Derek. "Why did you leave?" I didn't reply. I blocked the email, deleted the message, and tried to convince myself it was over. But then, the knocking started. A slow, deliberate knock at my front door. I froze, my mind racing. I hadn't heard anyone approach. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. There was no way someone could have made it up the steps without me hearing them. The knock came again. Louder, more insistent. I crept toward the door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway outside was empty. I waited, standing there in silence, my breath shallow. Minutes passed. I forced myself to turn away and head back to my bedroom. But as I did, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't an email, a text from an unknown number. "I know you're awake." My blood ran cold. I turned off my phone and crawled into bed, pulling the covers over my head like a child hiding from a monster. I lay there, rigid, straining my ears for any sound. The knocking never came again. The messages stopped. But I didn't sleep that night, and for weeks after, I kept feeling like someone was watching me. I live alone in a small, aging farmhouse, miles from anything but open fields and dirt roads. The nearest town is barely more than a gas station and a post office, and even that's a 20-minute drive away. It's quiet out here, nothing but the sound of wind sweeping over the land, the occasional coyote howling at night, and the rain when it decides to fall. And lately, it's been falling a lot. The rain had been steady for days, leaving the fields waterlogged and turning the dirt roads into thick, impassable mud. I spent the day indoors, going about my routine, listening to the rhythmic patter of rain against the windows. I had nowhere to be, no visitors to expect. It was just another lonely, peaceful day, until it wasn't. Late in the afternoon, I stepped onto my porch for a smoke, watching the mist roll in across the landscape. That's when I saw it. A lone motorcycle, barely visible through the haze, making its way down the muddy road leading to my property. The figure was clad in dark rain gear, a full-face helmet hiding their features. I didn't know what to think. No one ever comes down this way by accident. There are no through roads, no reason for anyone to be out here unless they had business with me. The riders slowed as they approached my driveway. I watched, waiting for them to turn around, to realize they had taken a wrong turn. But they didn't. Instead, they rolled forward, past my front yard, and stopped just in front of my garage. For a long moment, they just sat there, motionless, the rain dripping off their visor. They were looking at my house, looking at me. I stood frozen, cigarette burning between my fingers, watching them just as intently. And then, without a word or a signal, they turned the bike around and rode off the way they came, disappearing into the mist like a ghost. I told myself it was just a mistake. Someone lost, maybe. Someone trying to find their way back to the highway. But something about it gnawed at me. The way they just sat there. The way they didn't make a single move to acknowledge me before leaving. The rest of the evening was uneventful. I had dinner, watched some TV, tried to shake the unease that still lingered. The rain picked up around 8, turning into a full-blown storm. Thunder rumbled low in the distance, and the wind howled through the empty fields. And then, underneath it all, I heard something else. An engine, a deep, growling motor cutting through the rain. The same sound as before. I rushed to the front window, peering through the glass. The headlights sliced through the fog, bouncing as the bike made its way up the road again. Only this time, as they neared my property, the light flickered off. Darkness swallowed them whole. My stomach twisted into knots. I strained my eyes, trying to make out any movement, but there was nothing. Just the wind, the rain, and the empty night. I waited. Minutes passed. No footsteps, no knocking, no sound of the engine starting back up. Just silence. I grabbed my shotgun from the bedroom. I wasn't about to take any chances. Something wasn't right. I moved carefully from window to window, peeking out, scanning the yard. And then, just barely visible through the fog, I saw something shift near the side of my house. A figure. They were crouched low by the back window, their silhouette distorted by the rain-streaked glass. My breath caught in my throat as I watched them rise slowly to their full height. Their head turned toward me. They knew I was watching. I didn't wait. I threw open the back door, shotgun raised, and stepped onto the porch. The storm roared around me, but the figure didn't move. They stood there, still as stone, just feet away. Then they turned and bolted. I barely caught a glimpse of them as they disappeared into the night. I rushed to the front just in time to see them climbing onto the motorcycle, which had been hidden off the road in the tall grass. The engine roared to life and they peeled away, kicking up mud and water as they vanished into the storm. I stood there, heart hammering, the rain soaking me to the bone. I knew what I had seen. They hadn't come here by accident. They had been watching, waiting, and they weren't planning to knock. The next day, I drove into town and reported the incident to the sheriff. He listened, nodding along, but there wasn't much he could do. No plates, no real description. Just a shadow in the rain. That was 3 days ago. It hasn't stopped raining since.